I'm Rachel Horgan. Join me each episode as I sit down with a guest co-host covering the latest business stories in the Seattle area. We'll read the news so you don't have to. This is The Weekly. All right, hey everybody. We've got another special episode, as we've been doing this summer, about the shared micro-mobility industry. We interview Hayden with Lime. I take Lime a lot, and I noticed it around town, and I just started thinking, how does this business work, and how does it work with the city of Seattle, and what's going on here? So we have a really interesting interview to play for you with Hayden. I am going to skip kind of the top recap of business news for this episode. I'm pondering possibly doing a bonus one next week if I have time, just to make sure you guys are caught up on the news. And if you want to make sure you're keeping up with the news, make sure to follow us on Instagram, The Weekly Seattle, at The Weekly Seattle. And I post about business updates there. I also need to tell you guys about how I met Megan Rapinoe, and some other fun personal updates. So stay tuned for that in future episodes. But for now, enjoy the interview. All right. Hey, I'm here with Hayden Harvey, Director of Government Relations for Lime. So Lime Bike, Lime Scooter, Lime Glider, that Lime. And Hayden, so Lime is headquartered in San Francisco, but you're here in Seattle, right? So do you guys have an office here, or what is that like?
Yeah, we have a warehouse with a growing office in the Georgetown neighborhood.
Yeah, totally. Well, and I have to give a shout out to our buddy Nate Brown, a mutual friend of ours. Yeah, he works at Lime, and he kind of helped get us together. And also, I know Julie on your team helped a lot getting this interview together. So I wanted to make sure we give them a shout out. And GSBA, we're both GSBA members. Oh,
amazing. Yeah, I've been honored to be on the board of GSBA for a number of years. And shout out Nate, rising star at Lime and operations, really kind of keeps the train on the tracks.
Yeah, absolutely. So for listeners, today's episode is going to be all about I guess you call it micro-mobility industry. Is that right?
That's right.
Basically scooter and bike industry type stuff. We're going to learn all about kind of how they handled the World Cup, and just in general, how you operate something like that in the city. So I'm excited to get into it. But before we do that, I want to know, I listed your title, Director of Government Relations. Can you share a little bit more about what does that exactly mean?
Yeah. I have the privilege of working with our cities across the West. So regulators from departments of transportation, city officials, legislators, even in state governments across 11 states in the Western United States, working on sort of how our operating constructs function, how our fleets are deployed. I touch a lot of aspects of sort of how the public interacts with Lime, spanning marketing, in-app experiences, partnerships. I get to work with all of our nonprofit partners and advocacy partners like Transportation Choices Coalition, Seattle Safe Streets Alliance, and Cascade Bike Club, and organizations outside of Seattle as well. But I've called Seattle home for 8 years and been at Lime for the last 4. And so.
Okay. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I think I got a sense of it. So let's dive in. So I want to get kind of a big picture. Let's start with some stats if you have them. I'm kind of thinking how many states or how many countries even is Lime in, and how many scooters in operation? What's the scope of what we're dealing with here?
Sure. Yeah. Lime is the largest company of its type in the world. It's the largest global. You mentioned micromobility. We actually use the term shared micromobility.
Okay, got it.
Because Lime service is shared, but we operate in 30 countries on 5 continents, and I oversee 11 states, basically everything west of Denver. In terms of global fleet, we're talking hundreds of thousands of vehicles across those 5 continents.
Do you have any stats on Seattle specifically? How many how many scooters and bikes and gliders are out there?
Yeah, we're permitted to operate a fleet of 15,000 devices.
Wow.
So about half of our fleet is seated bikes and seated scooters, and the other half is the standing scooters you're familiar with. Yeah.
Yeah. I know. I'm looking at my window right now, and I've seen a couple go by.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to start with World Cup because I was down there in Pioneer Square, and I looked over and I took a picture of it. It was kind of soothing to my OCD of just all these bikes lined up perfectly. Yeah, one of the little parking lots. So how did your team even prepare for this logistically, and kind of what are some lessons you learned along the way?
Yeah, I mean, World Cup was a pretty gargantuan lift. Seattle's unique in that the stadium is right in the urban core. There's not a lot of, surface parking for cars and things like that. And so I would say planning started nearly a year ago. We began working with the local organizing committee as well as SDOT about a year ago. And that effort sort of grew into multiple departments, the waterfront, SPD. I mean, as we got closer and closer to the event, it really became sort of like we became well integrated into the delivery of FIFA, because I knew early on that people from around the world and locals were going to use Lime in great numbers to get to FIFA, just because of some of the realities around car parking and transit. And so we sort of began, I would say, in earnest at the beginning of this year, thinking about what sort of like square footage we needed for all these devices and what would make sense from a planning perspective around sort of like pedestrians. And obviously we knew hundreds of thousands of people were going to visit Seattle and be in Pioneer Square. And so how do we get people close but mitigate conflicts with people walking around and stuff like that? And so the effort was really kicked off by identifying like where the parking locations were going to be.
Yeah. What's something, that you learned kind of in this process of like, oh shit, we probably shouldn't have put this here, or like we needed more of these, or just something you didn't see coming? Because we do this in events all the time. We call it a post-mortem. And we kind of look back on the event. And we're like, oh, that didn't work out like we thought. Or I don't know, maybe something worked out better than you thought. What are reflections?
Yeah. I think post-mortem infers bad.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
true.
like for
we really
us,
should call it something else.
For us, like FIFA was a massive success, right? In terms of the amount of people we were able to get in a pretty condensed time frame into one area. And so what I think I learned, more is more when it comes to parking. Everything worked fairly well and as sort of designed. I think there could always be more parking locations. Dispersing, it was intriguing to see like 1,000 vehicles in one parking lot, but dispersing the fleets are usually a little bit better for like the rider and operations to manage a more diffuse kind of ridership than like all concentrated in one place. It got a little gnarly at the last match, as more and more and more vehicles came into the parking lot I was in. I was like, we might run out of room.
Yeah. Do you rent that parking lot from the city? Or I'm not sure where the spot, like, because some of them were actual parking lots, some of them were just areas, closed off streets and such. So who are you paying people for those?
The local organizing committee knew early on that micromobility would be a mode that people took to, and so they secured the parking locations. They did a number of things, not to speak for them, but they had been working on the transportation plan for years. And so as Lime's popularity grew and as they were planning for this event, they secured the surface lots that our vehicles were staged in. And they had their own agreements with the parking
so they
companies
pay for it and you use them. Got it. Yeah.
Right.
So I read a headline that Seattle has the highest use of Lime in the nation. And I saw some stat that was like 83,000 rides a day. I don't know if that's out of date or if that's current, but I have a feeling, my working theory is that in Seattle, we also have the highest cost of rideshare of Ubers and Lyfts and things. So I think that's playing into more, because I know myself when I will look at an Uber and a Lyft and I'll see that rate and I'll say, I'm just going to bike home. So what's your take on that? Why do you think Seattle has the highest?
Yeah, a few things. The 83,000 number is not per day. 83,000 was our highest ridership day ever, which was a FIFA match. The Juneteenth match on June 19th was our highest single day ridership ever, with 83,000 rides. Seattle is certainly one of the highest ridership markets. I'm not confident that it is like the
number one. Oh, I want to be
number one.
Okay,
because
but
we
we're
operate, we operate in like major Western European capitals with hundreds of kilometers of bike lanes and things like that, where folks just take to active transportation in a different way than we see in North America. But our ridership is super significant, right? I think on average in the summer months, we're doing something like 50,000-ish daily rides, akin to like an entire light rail line. A stat that more people will ride Lime today in Seattle than enter Westlake Station. Wow. I think when you contextualize it like that, like one of the bigger things I took away from FIFO was Lime is mass transportation in Seattle. And I think it's hard for people to make that connection because it's one person, one vehicle. But then when you see 1,000 in a parking lot, it starts to change or at least move the gears a little bit on really the volume of people that Lime is moving.
Do you think there's a reason why Seattle is kind of up there in the ridership? I mentioned the Uber thing, but are there other reasons why Seattle sets itself apart a little bit with ridership?
Yeah, I don't know about the cost of rideshare. Your hunch may be right. I think when I think about like why people take to Lime in Seattle the way they do, I think first of all about the bike infrastructure that the city continues to invest in. I mentioned Western Europe. We don't have a bike network akin to like a Paris or a London yet, but Seattle and Seattleites have voted year after year after year to continue investing in the infrastructure that makes Lime an attractive option for folks. I also think Northwesterners are like hardy people and we live in a beautiful place and folks are eager to get around without a car.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I think it's part of our culture, and I think we have the infrastructure with like the Burke Gilman and a lot of other bike trails. Totally. We may not be up to par with other cities, but we're definitely up there. I
think it's also the fact that it continues to expand, right? They're not just single spines of bike infrastructure anymore, particularly people who use Lime frequently or bike often. You begin to connect your sort of like normal destinations via bike routes. And I think we continue to see the city building more, and I think people will continue to take to Lime.
Yeah. Like that 3rd Avenue bike lane. I'm cruising down that.
Exactly.
Okay. I'm sticking with Lime and Seattle together. And one thing I found interesting when I was doing my research, so I was on a work trip in Boston and I was like, where the fuck are all the Lime bikes? Like I'm trying to go to dinner and I can't find one. And they had these, I forgot what they're called, blue bikes or something. But those is it blue bike? Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're more like a city bike where they're only in one place. Like you can check it out of one park and then like check it back in somewhere very specific. So this is when I'm starting to learn that Lime has 100% market share in Seattle. It seems like you're the only provider.
We're the only
right?
operator currently. Yeah.
And that's not the case for every city. So there are other cities I was researching that have, like the other companies, Bird, Spin, like other people have seen. How do you go about getting the only, like that seems incredible that you're the only provider. How did you get that to happen? And is that beneficial for Seattle, or how do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Blue Bike and dock bike systems. I think across active transportation, Seattle's not an outlier in that it has currently a single vendor. With dock systems, we see virtually every city with a dock system having a single vendor. Lime is currently the only permitted operator, but it doesn't mean that the city's program isn't open to other operators. I think Lime's been in Seattle since 2017. It's one of our oldest active markets. We've competed for the better part of a decade in Seattle across operators that are no longer in business, operators that are no longer in Seattle. Lime has earned its leadership position in Seattle primarily through like our investment in the program in the city. Across our offering, I mean, we've competed on price, we've competed on hardware, we've competed on app experience year after year after year. And so we've arrived at this place where we're the only current operator, but I don't think it was a fluke. I think Seattleites decided which service they preferred and have, sort of voted with their wallets, for lack of a better phrase.
Yeah, I guess when I was first thinking about it, I was like, if I'm the city of Seattle, I would probably want multiple providers because then I'm getting multiple permit fees from them, and then they're competing on price. So like if you just have one, you could charge whatever you want. But kind of what I'm learning a little bit more is like you guys could get replaced at any time. So if you went crazy and increased your pricing, that doesn't mean you're the only one there forever. Like there's still other companies that you're competing with, even if they don't have market share in Seattle.
Yeah, I mean, from a city perspective, not to speak for the city, there's also efficiencies in like single vendor relationships. We see that in Dock Bike Share commonly. Lime is increasingly like a highly complex transportation network. There's a greater degree of control and ability to, from a city perspective, manage what is increasingly complex network with fewer touch points.
You mean to say that local government can be slow, Hayden, sometimes?
Never. I would never say that about our friends.
No, I mean, all local government. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Like it's just an additional challenge to work with another vendor where it's like, this vendor's doing great. Like, why would we need to add it in?
I think also like when you think about major events and sort of a regional approach, Lime doesn't just operate in Seattle. We operate in Bellevue, Shoreline, Bothell, Redmond. I'm certainly forgetting a few cities, but
it's more
there
than
is
Seattle.
This sort of network effect where people integrate Lime into their transportation journey, not just, in the downtown core, but really across the region.
Yeah. So you mentioned you work with a lot of different states and cities. How do the permitting fees vary across city to city? Or it's by city or by state? I think by city.
By city, yeah. But everyone does it differently. Some folks choose like a per vehicle fee. Some people choose a per vehicle. Many of my markets get quite cold, and so there's seasonality. And so we look at like prorating a permit fee on a per vehicle basis so that a vehicle we're not incentivized to keep a vehicle out in the right of way if it's not getting ridden. Other municipalities go about it through trip fees. So there's some amount of contribution for every trip taken.
Kind of like the hotel model where there's
exactly.
Like a fee on, Mm-hmm.
Yep. Other folks combine the two. Most cities take their own approach. I think what's important is like stability and predictability, both on the customer side and the operator side. What is important to us is to be able to deliver a service that is always on every day and that the customer can predictably expect like what they're going to get. And so, I mean, it differs, even within specific cities. Sometimes we might operate on a university campus within a city, and the fee constructs can be different.
Wow, I didn't know that. That sounds like a lot of negotiating contracts.
Yeah, I mean, it can be. Sometimes it's pretty straightforward, though. Like, I think generally what I've experienced is cities are looking to bring in a certain amount of money that allows them to administer the program. And we have great relationships with our cities.
Yeah, no, that's good. So then what do you see as competition if you are the only provider here? Is it walking? Like, is it, and then I want to say it might be Uber, but like Uber, as we'll talk about soon, as has a huge stake in Lime, so it's not really a I don't know. Like, what do you see as that?
I believe that Seattleites have a great deal of optionality when it comes to like getting where they want to go. We have one of the fastest growing light rail systems in the country. We have one of the most highly utilized bus networks in the country. A huge amount of people have their own bikes, their own e-bikes even. And so I think there is competition, so to speak, for how people get where they want to go. In the same vein, we're also our own competition. I think Seattle is not a city of complacency. I certainly see Lime as having to set the bar for itself on tech, hardware, app experience, and affordability. I mean, I think if Lime were to just jack up the prices, people would get around a different way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're kind of seeing that with some of the regulation that came out with why our delivery drive, like our Uber Eats and our DoorDash is so expensive. And you're seeing a definite decrease in usage of those. So to your point, like, yeah, if you did start charging a lot, that is going to change consumer behavior.
I think also, like, we have to look at our past selves, right? Like, Lime is not ever really stagnant. We're sort of always iterating on pricing options. We're delivering flat rate pricing options. We're delivering subscription models so that people can really come to rely on the service, day in, day out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mentioned this Uber thing. It was 2020 and Uber invested $170 million into Lime, which I guess sort of coincided with how Uber folded their bike Jump. If people remember the Uber Jump bikes, folded that into your Lime business. How has that impacted your role specifically, whether that's with partnerships or working with the city? Do they kind of see you as one, or does it make it easier to negotiate with that power? Like, what does that look like for you?
Well, I certainly don't think it makes it easier. This was before my time. The deal, so to speak, was that Lime service is available within the Uber app. And we see a ton of people. I go to dozens of events in Seattle and all over the West. And I'm always shocked because I use the Lime app pretty much every day. Mm-hmm. I'm always surprised at nearly every event I go to. Someone goes, "You guys have an app?"
Oh, because they're booking Uber.
Right. And it always is like, yes, we have an app. But I think what it does is, particularly in Seattle, we have big hills. I think that lends people to wanting to get around without a car, but not necessarily always on their own 2 feet. And when you go to book an Uber ride in the app, and it's quite short, Uber will start to push you towards the Lime service because it's more efficient across their network. Really short car trips are sort of inefficient in a number of ways. And so one of the more impactful components of the Uber partnership is that when people are looking at Uber for what could be like a very short, inefficient trip, many of them are ending up on a Lime to go half a mile, a couple blocks, something like that. And I think from a urbanism and sort of transportation policy perspective, like, that's a great benefit of the partnership. Taking a car a few blocks is a highly inefficient use of sort of our limited street space. And so if you can have someone on a much smaller, lower impact, carbon-free vehicle in a bike lane, it's a much better way to get folks around Seattle.
I'm with you, except for one exception, which is if I'm wearing high heels and a dress, then I am taking an Uber.
I have certainly taken a Lime in high heels before.
Oh, okay. Fair.
A bike and a scooter.
Well, now that we have that glider, I could probably do it. You're right.
Exactly.
Is there anything else you want to say on the Uber Lime partnership before I move on?
Not particularly.
Okay, great. So I would be... and when I talk about this interview, when I tell people I'm doing this interview, so often when I talk about Lime, safety is such a second topic when you talk about it, as I'm sure you deal with in your conversations as well. So I felt like I had to bring this into the conversation. We saw reports from Harborview that there's been an increase in scooter and bike injuries or e-bike injuries, not Lime specifically. Like, there are some e-bikes out there that people have on their own. This kind of gets to a little bit of a philosophical, big picture question of what really is Lime's responsibility in some of this safety. And when I think about it, I think there's a responsibility of somebody that makes a car, or we're also seeing this in Gasworks Park with that structure, right? Like, the safety of building it, and they took the stairs down and such. And then there's the policy and regulation. So you have to wear a seatbelt, and, we put that fence around the Gasworks thing. And then there's like the role and responsibility of the user. So the driver needs to be doing the right thing, and people shouldn't be climbing fences to climb Gasworks Park. So to me, I kind of think there's like a lot of things that come into safety. But from your perspective, how do you think about Lime's role in that?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked. I think we take injuries and safety across our service very seriously. I think safety is built into how we operate. It is front of mind in our vehicle design. It's front of mind in many of our app experiences, many of our rider education components. It's pretty foundational to how we operate. You mentioned the Harvard Review study. It is encouraging to see research being done about the safety of people who use Seattle's roads. The Harvard Review, the study you're referencing, sort of presents data in raw numbers only and sort of without the contextualization of utilization. And so when you sort of weight injury rates or the injury rates mentioned in the study with ridership, we actually see that injury rate is increasing at a lower rate than ridership is increasing. I think that's an important piece of context that is sort of left out of the narrative. That is not to say that there isn't advancements to be made in terms of road safety for people who use Seattle streets, but I think it is important to provide sort of contextualization about the report and about how our ridership is, and sometimes more than doubling year over year, and that is not what we see happening with regard to injuries.
Yeah, I think that's a good insight and kind of something to think about because, yeah, the data is different when you add different pieces to it to fully understand it.
I also think like safety is perceptional, right? A lot of times safety, both with Lyme and other aspects of our lives, are kind of based on one's view of the thing that's happening. And so I'll often hear about speed to someone standing still. Maybe someone going by on a Lyme feels really fast, but our vehicles, the motors won't move you faster than 15 miles an hour. And I think what we see with like private devices is some of these unregulated e-motos and sort of consumer private scooter products are moving people like very, very fast. Sometimes I've seen reports of, more than 30 miles an hour, and e-motos can go even faster. And I think it's important for us to center that Lyme sort of runs a highly regulated vehicle in its essence, right? Like they only go 15 miles an hour. We know who our riders are. There's controls in place for where you can go, slow zones, things like that. When you look at private devices, it gets quite frightening, I think, often, especially with the age of people using some of these private devices. It can get quite scary when someone, especially a young person, goes past you on a private device 30 miles an hour or more.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's a good point about the regulation that you guys are under. I was thinking about helmets too, where I think Lyme definitely encourages helmet wear, and I was looking at kind of whose responsibility is that, and basically it's whatever city you're in, it's up to the city whether they want to enforce that or not. And I think technically, I guess it's against the law, but like Seattle's not really enforcing it, which I don't think any city really is. So I don't feel like there's much more Lyme could really do in that front.
We give out thousands of helmets in Seattle each year. Some of it is regulated or mandated through the permit, but we've sort of doubled the amount of helmets that we're giving out. And they're lime green now, and I notice them a lot more than I used to. And I'll be scooting around or biking downtown and see these little lime green heads moving around. On a state-by-state basis, helmet regulation is different. On a city-by-city basis, helmet regulation is different. Folks should be wearing a helmet when they ride a Lyme. I want people using helmets when they ride Lyme, and we sort of hammer that home through rider education, through the flows that people are sort of fed when they first take a ride in Seattle. And so
so you mentioned a little about the tech, and I want to talk about that. So I know that when I go out, I live by the Fremont Bridge, and when I go over, it used to slow me down. It doesn't anymore. When it slowed me down when I went to the UW campus, which was I didn't know this, and I was trying to get to a game. But there's the capability, and I get why you do it. Obviously, I don't want me running over students. So there's the slow down feature, and it obviously seems to know like where you are. I had a friend, unfortunately, she has a view of a freeway, and she did see a Lime scooter go on a freeway and unfortunately get hit. But how does that happen if you have the ability to know where the Lime bikes are? Are they still, is this like a total one-off? Are they still technically able to get on these freeways? What do you think?
Yeah, I'll take it in a few different pieces. I'll talk about the Fremont Bridge first. A few years ago, we were looking at sort of our zones, our slow speed zones across the city, and we had gotten some outreach from Lyme riders, but then also from cyclists who use the Fremont Bridge all the time. think the regulation initially, the slow speed zone on the Fremont Bridge, was well intentioned, but it became this situation where so many people are using their own bikes and other micromobility devices to cross the bridge that the Lime Rider sort of became the bottleneck. Yeah. And so we worked with SDOT to change some of the zones on the bridges so that we weren't the bottleneck. I had an experience on the Fremont Bridge where, I'm going 7 miles an hour and a cyclist tries to go around me and someone else is coming the other way. And it just started to create these, which goes to kind of thousands of people cross the Fremont Bridge every day. But I think like with slow speed zones and just zones in general, there can be unintended consequences.
Totally.
You kind of mentioned freeways. Cities like Seattle are sort of 4-dimensional. Geofencing, we often geofence like freeway on-ramps and off-ramps and, the I-5 main line and things like that. But cities have this fourth dimension to them where, the off-ramp or a bridge might be above a street. Geofencing doesn't sort of work in airspace, so to speak. And so there can be issues like what you described because of sort of the nature of the built environment.
Are you saying that's in place right now, that Lime scooters, to the best of your ability, you do block them from freeway on-ramps and off-ramps as much as you can? And so if you do see it, then it's like one of those situations where there's a street above it or below it or like something like that.
An edge case. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's good to know. I've also seen some new tech, like a voice that comes on. It says, I think it says, don't ride on the sidewalk or use bike lane or something like that. And it talks to you. I know you're kind of using some other AI technologies. How is that implementation going? And are there things you've learned from that as well?
Yeah, we're rolling out sidewalk detection across our standing fleet in Seattle. So right now we have about 3,500, scaling to up to 7,500 sidewalk detection units across the fleet. And there's an audible alert when we detect sidewalk riding. This has become required as part of our operating permit, but also Seattle's sort of always been an innovation hub for us. I kind of mentioned we have a lot of tech talent. Seattle's a really dynamic city from a road surface perspective, from a topography perspective, from a weather perspective. And so we've been iterating on our sidewalk detection technology for, I believe this is the second year. And we're at a place where we have a high fidelity solution that we're deploying broadly. I'm encouraged to see when sidewalk detection is implemented and we see like sort of, I'll call it like low recidivism. After an audible alert and a post-trip notification, we see the incidence of sidewalk riding decrease. And I think it's also important to mention that folks are broadly required to park on a sidewalk. And Seattle has great bike infrastructure, but no city is perfect. And we see folks when we do surveys, when we do interviews, we see folks take to sidewalks often when they feel unsafe in the street. I would say broadly, sidewalk detection is going well, and I'm eager to see us scale and see sort of at a really granular level where sidewalk riding is highest, and what sort of adjustments, implementations we can make in partnership with the city.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I ride them a lot, and there are times where I'm on the sidewalk and sometimes it's yelling at me and I'm like, I know, but if you saw the street right now, I promise you this is a better choice just for right this little section. So yeah, there are maybe some exceptions, but I get the problem too. I know that it's dangerous for some of the pedestrians. So
yeah, it's not, I mean,
it's human
behavior.
Perfect.
This job has taught me a lot about human behavior and modifying it. I think one of the biggest learning is it's hard. And that said, like, I'm really encouraged to see solutions to sort of some of the industry's like existential challenges being developed in Seattle and sort of export it around the world. I think it's cool to see for Seattle to be sort of the recipient of much of the best of like what Lime has to offer.
I know safety is kind of a hot topic when you think about Lime, so I want to give you the opportunity. Is there anything that you want to make sure that our audience knows about safety when it comes to Lime?
Yeah, I would say I mentioned contextualization. I think something that people don't recognize when you think of the volume of Lime rides happening, when you standardize for it, our incident rate is commensurate with the national average of incidents of people walking. And I think when you put it into perspective, that's not to say that there isn't room for improvement. There's always room for improvement. But I think it's something that broadly the public doesn't know or think about.
Yeah, it's true. And we also have a lot of car accidents, and we're doing the best we can on that too. So yeah. So your role, I think there's some regulation. We talked a little bit about it, but is there some policy or regulation, whether it's Seattle or a different city, honestly, just that you're proud of, or I guess maybe that you wish could happen in some cities? Like what's something that maybe we don't know about when you're dealing with policy and regulation?
I like this question. I'll keep talking about Seattle. And it sort of touches on both parts of your question. I'm really proud of the work that we've been doing in the last city budget process, but also for the better part of like 12 to 18 months on parking infrastructure. I often say no one wants Lime devices off of the sidewalks and in the streets more than me, the people who work at Lime. And in the last year, we worked with city council and through the budget process to begin to study what does developing sort of in-street parking infrastructure look like. And SDOT has built, I think, hundreds of corrals at this point, places for people to park. If you spend any time downtown, you'll notice it might look like a white box on a sidewalk. There's many in the street. There's many being developed in sort of Pioneer Square and other parts of the city. I think we're sort of blind to the impact of cars in our lives. People sort of intrinsically understand where you park a car. When you talk to people who ride Lime, and even people who might park incorrectly after the fact, we learn that the vast majority of people who use Lime want to do the right thing. And so I think I'm proud of the work we've done on pushing forward our city partners to build more infrastructure to park. And if I could wave a magic wand, we would continue working together to accelerate and scale the implementation of additional parking infrastructure. There's this really kind of nice synergistic effect where micromobility parking can serve as daylighting for crosswalks and intersections. When implemented properly, it can create this secondary safety benefit for people crossing streets and creating space in between like where cars park and where people use crosswalks. And I think as a cyclist, as a pedestrian, I'm eager to see those sort of synergistic effects scale and excited to continue working with the city on building more parking.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you build it, they will come. Like if you build more parking, people will actually park there. Because I know a lot of people complain about, these Lime bikes are everywhere. But once we start giving them a place to put them, to your point, I think people will try and do it as much as they can as possible.
I sort of, there's so many like little sayings. I say, if you deploy it, they will ride. And when I talk about parking, Seattle cities generally, they want to do the right thing. They want to measure twice and cut once. And I often say more is more when it comes to parking. There is no, in my view, one size fits all solution. There's no standard parking stall, right? Like in some places on sidewalk is going to make the most sense. In other places, daylighting implementations are going to make the most sense. In other places, maybe repurposing a car parking spot, which can hold one car versus 20 limes might be the right approach. And so I'm sort of eager to see what's possible in subsequent years, both from getting scooters off sidewalks, but also the safety benefits for people who will never use Lime, but use Seattle streets.
Yeah. I have one more question for you. Well, I guess two, because I have my clothing question, but one more about Lime, which is just kind of in general. You mentioned it a little bit about, more parking spaces, but is there anything else you think about the future of this industry? Because I feel like it's still, I guess, relatively new when you think about it compared to cars and such. But where do you see this industry going in 5 to 10 years? Do you think it's where like even small towns will start to have it, or those cities like Boston will kind of move away from the city bike? Do you think it's just going to get more innovative, like the new glider that I mentioned and things like that? We're going to have unicycle Limes?
Hopefully not. You're not coordinated enough to each their own. I just don't know that is going to be the mode for me. I don't know that I'm coordinated enough for that.
No,
I think about the future, I think about Lime and services like Lime helping to operationalize safer streets for everyone who uses them. I think the more people who take to Lime interact with city streets in a way that they didn't used to, they start to have perspectives about what feels safe in a street, what doesn't feel safe. I envision more biking infrastructure in cities of all sizes and more optionality for people to get around without a car. So maybe that looks like vehicles, like Lime devices that look different than they do today. Maybe it's more cargo capacity. Maybe it is vehicles designed for people who currently look at like a standing scooter and say, that's not for me. I think we've done that with Glider, but on the sort of like beyond the horizon outlook, I think of safer streets because more people are getting around without a car. I think right now it can be easy to ignore some of the safety concerns that cyclists and the biking community have raised for decades because we default to getting around without a car. But when more and more people who look more like my dad and mom than me are using Lime or a micromobility device to sort of conduct the business of their lives, I think policy will accelerate sort of the safety of our streets.
Yeah. Well said.
For people who use Lime and people who never intend to use Lime, I think, there is, in so many ways, two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, it helps the bicycle community and the walking community sometimes, depending on what area we're talking about. Yeah.
Totally.
Well, Hayden, this has been fun. My last question I ask a lot of my guests is just something. What have you stopped doing? And this can be whether professional or personal or silly or serious.
What have I stopped doing through this job?
Yeah. Well, it doesn't have to be this job, but just like this year, where what's something you're just like, I'm done doing that.
I am done using my car to go to my doctor's appointments because I live quite close to the doctor and I always used to go there, and I feel like there's something healthy about taking the bike to the doctor. There's exceptions, of course, rain and when I feel really sick, but like I feel very, healthy when I show up for my checkup, like on my little bike. I park it at Swedish Cherry Hill off to the side and go to my doctor's appointment. I feel pretty, not superior, but I feel like he'd be proud of me,
Yes. No, I think you're going to get a better score on your physical just from riding the bike. I believe it.
Exactly.
Yeah. The weight is probably lower just from that ride. I'm going to start doing that too. I like it.
What have you started doing this year?
I stopped working from home 5 days a week. I got a co-working space and it has changed my life. Yeah. So that's something, but there's probably some other things I could probably stop doing, but that's one unhealthy habit at a time.
Yeah.
Well, Hayden, thank you so much for sitting down with me and kind of talking about the shared micro-mobility industry. I appreciate it. And hopefully I see you at a GSBA event or around town soon.
Yeah.
We'll go for a ride.
Equalux is in October. You'll definitely see me there.
Okay.
I look forward to it.
All right. Thanks for your time.
Of course.
This has been The Weekly, with production assistance from Nick Patry. If you liked what you heard, rate us and write a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify.
We love listener feedback, so if you have any story suggestions, comments, or complaints, email us at info@theweeklyseattle.com. Make sure to check back next Sunday for the latest local business news. We'll see you next time.